there will your heart be also. I know I said it time and again, one of the things that strikes me most about St. John Henry Newman and his conversion is that it gave him no comfort. He said time and again and wrote in several places, essentially that he did not come for any emotional reason from Anglicanism into the Catholic Church. He did not come for a sense of welcome. He didn't know a single Catholic, really. He came because he believed he was following the truth and doing only what he must. We know that when Saint Therese of Lisieux, the Little Flower, was first being considered for sainthood, like everyone else being vetted for the role, if you will, they had to review all of the things she had ever written. It was actually quite easy. It was a few personal letters and the one book, The Story of the Soul. I can't imagine how long it took for Vatican officials to review the writings of John Henry Newman. The man didn't have an unpublished thought. Not just written down, published, put in newspapers, exchanges, arguments with fellow Anglicans early in life, and then later with fellow Catholics and Anglicans. If he wanted to write a letter to someone, he often just put it in the newspaper. They had to review thousands and thousands and thousands of pages of writing, many of which he had edited and re-edited himself. But when John Henry Newman was made a cardinal, it was the capstone of a life of failure. Much of what he thought about himself and his life's effort were that it didn't work, that everything he had touched, if not came to naught, came to difficulty and hardship. And it was only, and it was a great blessing in his life, it was only at the very end of life when he was made a cardinal and his life's work was beginning to be recognized by the Catholic Church that he began to see himself that thread of success that wove through everything he did. Today we celebrate our builder, the man who decided a Byzantine Romanesque church was the best exemplar of a true Catholicism, a tying back to the church fathers who were the reason he was Catholic. He was quoted as saying that he was not converted by the example of Catholics. He was converted by Oxford because it was while he was at Oxford he was given the time to read and to think and to pray. And it was in reading the church fathers that he understood that there was a direct correlation, a direct connection between Jesus Christ and the Apostolic Church and the Catholic Church that protected a core of truth that he came to fear his own communion had given away. But as he left his own communion, he did so with a heavy heart because all of his friends, all of his co-workers, all of his colleagues left him. And as I've reminded you all before, even one of his beloved sisters didn't speak to him for 40 years from the moment he converted to Catholicism. So his choice to follow, to pursue truth as he understood it, was not an easy one. He once said in a letter to a friend, "We can believe what we choose, but we are answerable for what we choose to believe. In his work, Newman is perhaps best known for his development of doctrine. The idea that truth doesn't change. But because of where we stand in life, because of where we observe the truth, from where we observe it, our perspective on it shifts. Our culture shifts. Our society shifts. And so we have to come up with new ways of expressing old truths, new understandings of those truths, and perhaps new and deeper realization of what those truths are actually saying. Newman's development of doctrine became an important cog and link in the understandings of theology which underpin the Second Vatican Council. Newman believed that one of the most important things that we have is our conscience. He once said in another letter to His Grace the Duke of Norfolk that conscience is the aboriginal vicar of Christ. Conscience is the voice of God in each one of us. And because of that, we must follow our conscience. But don't believe that this was some easy modern understanding of we get to do what we feel like. But for him, if it's the voice of God in us, we have a deep and important responsibility, each and every one of us, to try to find that voice, to hear that voice, and to understand it amongst the depths of the truths of Christ as we have been taught. And so, in fact, it is not an easy getting out of jail free card, but rather a statement of responsibility that each and every one of us has to try to find that God's voice within us, to hear what God is calling us to and the truth God is telling us, and then to articulate it as best we can. Newman's understanding of the formation of conscience and the role of conscience in our world and in our life underpins Vatican II's statement on religious freedom. No less an authority than Pope Benedict once called John Henry Newman the father of the Second Vatican Council. It's important for us to recognize that this man who has had such an intense impact on us, even if we don't recognize it or understand it, once walked these very aisles, once struggled with his own understanding of where God was calling him to, once spent a lifetime trying to articulate that difficulty, that struggle, and to help others to walk the same journey of faith. In less than a month, John Henry Newman will be declared a doctor of the church. It is an honor reserved now. He will be the 38th in the history of the church, along with people like Catherine of Siena, the Little Flower, St. Augustine, and Thomas Aquinas. He is being held up as someone who can show us the way, who can help us to understand the depth of God's love for us. And I think what's most important about John Henry Newman, he was an incredible theologian, but mostly he was an explainer of theology. And he was also deeply prayerful and spiritual man, who through his writings not only elucidates truth in the way he writes in prose, his poetry brings us to a deeper understanding in our very core to God's love for each and every one of us. And he does believe God has a deep love for us. He once wrote that one of the things that's important for us to remember is that somehow, and he's writing about himself, somehow I am necessary for God's purposes. This is an important concept that each and every one of us made in the image and likeness of God, has an essential role in our world. As a fulfiller of God's will, somehow I am necessary for his purposes, as necessary in my place as an archangel in his. John Henry Newman helps us to understand our unity, our oneness with God, helps us to recognize the depth of God's love for us, and guides us to understand the depth of our responsibility to respond to God in kind.